Good evening. Today we're going to talk about the gift of generosity, of giving. Is, without a doubt, a virtue that goes by many names. Within the series on Kahlil Gibran. And always, at the beginning, even though there are people who are already familiar with the idea, I like to explain how this reading club was born. In reality, Gibran is fairly well known. You've asked someone, heard of poet Kahlil Gibran? And the person has never heard of him. It's funny, and many people don't know about him. So the idea was to make this poem more widely known, not just in breadth, but also more deeply understood. Sometimes people know and recite Gibran, but his work is very profound. If you know the Prophet, it's a small book about this size. But it speaks about love, generosity, justice, marriage, about children. Basically, it addresses everything that is important in human life. To write with such depth in so few pages, he must possess great profundity, a trait of those who speak little but wish to convey much. It is a symbolic language. As we always mention, nowadays we talk a lot but say very little. It is a superficial and materialistic language. So let us continue with our series, today speaking about the gift. First, those brief parenthetical notes we make about his biography. Gibran was born in 1883 in Lebanon. He died in 1931 in New York. He had a rather difficult existence, almost unlivable if not for the support of an American woman, Mary Elizabeth Haskell, who would become a patron throughout his life, and also someone with whom Gibran had a very intense relationship, with beautiful letters that were compiled into a book, which is the Love Letters of Kahlil Gibran. Their relationship was very interesting, and she made it possible for a Lebanese teenager to be present in the United States. Without speaking English, which was a rather complex situation, she recognized his talent, invested, and supported him for practically his whole life. He died very young, at the age of 47. If I ask you, a person like Gibran, who left behind so many works, so much knowledge, did he live a long life or a short one? Do you realize that the question is not about the amount of time, but the quality? Because sometimes people can live 90 years and not leave for themselves or for the world what Gibran left. So time is a very curious thing. It is not measured only by the horizontal, by quantity. It is measured much more by the vertical, by quality, by depth. How much of a difference you make, how much you add, both to your own growth and to the growth of humanity that comes after you. And even today, we are here talking about him and learning from him. So he is not someone we can say lived little. He had a very profound life. This work, The Prophet, we cannot say it is poetry, but rather poetic prose. But in any case, considering this genre of poetic prose, poetry, it is a book that was very well received. It has already been translated into more than 40 languages. Today, poetry is hardly published because no one reads it. It is very rare, only those established authors, and even then, for a limited audience. For a book to be so well received within this realm of poetry and poetic prose is already quite remarkable. But our dream, as philosophers, is that it would become even more widely known and better understood. So, as I always mention in this series of lectures about Gibran, the context of this book, his main work not his only, but the main. The Prophet tells the story of a man named Al-Mustafa, who lived on an island, but wished to leave it and go to a city called Acropolis. He was very wise and believed that the people there could benefit from his wisdom. He goes there and lives for 12 years on this island, and the people pay no attention to him and completely ignore him. Then one day, he climbs a hill by the sea and sees a boat approaching with fishermen, boatmen from his island. He says, "I am finally going home after 12 years." It is curious because when people see that he is leaving, realize they never took advantage of his presence. Awareness comes through contrast. This is the Eastern theory of impact. They say when about to lose something, we realize its value. When we move cities, we appreciate where we used to live. When faced with death, we realize the value of life. So, when people are losing al-Mustafa, they recognize the value he had and that they never appreciated. They learned nothing from him. So they surround him and say, "All right, you have the right to return home. But you cannot leave here without sharing a testimony of your wisdom, without teaching us a few things." So they begin to ask questions. And this book is a synthesis of the questions they ask him. They are short chapters, very brief, and each chapter is a question. Tell us about love. Tell us about friendship. Tell us about joy and sorrow. Tell us about pleasure and pain. Tell us about so many things. And he answers them one by one. Now, an important aside, why 12 years? This is not by chance. This book is symbolic, it is a myth. These 12 years symbolically represent a zodiacal circle, a complete human life. And the inhabitants of the city of Acropolis represent him speaking to himself. His own consciousness sharing the knowledge he has gathered throughout his life. Many traditions have represented the number 12 as the circumference of human experience. A person will go through the same experiences several times, always growing a little more each time, and this forms a spiral until one day he masters the entire human experience, all the values, all the virtues, all the wisdom that can be attained as a human being. Then he can ask, what is the origin of the circumference, and discover the center. Because every circumference is defined by a set of points equidistant from the center. It is born from the center. So he finds the center, he finds his spiritual essence. It is as if there is a dialogue between this higher consciousness he has achieved and all the elements that live within him. And these psychological elements are represented by the inhabitants of Acropolis. I always mention in this talk, in fact, that Carl Jung, that thinker who created analytical psychology, was very fond of myths. And he used to say that a structure similar to that of myths is the structure of our dreams. Both in myths and in some of our dreams, the only character is you. Engaging in a dialogue with yourself, do you know that? Sometimes, something that provokes disgust in you is a flaw you are not yet able to deal with. Something that inspires your admiration, a heightened state of consciousness. Everything within the dream is you, engaging in a dialogue with yourself. It is as if the dream projects outward what you are unable to see within. And this is the structure of myth. There is never more than one person in the myth. As Aristotle once said in his Poetics, the myth is the human being in dialogue with themselves. It is a moment when you are able to make your emotions, your mind, your body, everything become still. Listen to it. And in that moment, he feels an inner life. That would basically be the story. One thing that is interesting for you to notice today, as we talk about the gift, since he speaks so little and the chapters are short, we cannot miss anything. Every word has meaning. So there is always a relationship between the one who asks and the question that is asked. Obviously, nothing happens by chance. So it is interesting for us to start noticing these elements. Every chapter has the same thing, the relationship between the one who asks and the question that is posed. And another curiosity about Gibran is that the answer he gives is never what we expect. Never. I often joke that it's almost like learning the alphabet of Kahlil Gibran's language. Because he always surprises us. You expect him to go one way, and he goes another. He defines freedom. We expect one thing, but he says something very different. So does love. And here when it comes to giving or generosity, it's no different. Because most of the things we think about generosity, he says, it's an exchange, a kind of trade. Most of the time, you are in a horizontal relationship and expect something in return. Recognition, the other person's happiness, social status, or perhaps a way to ease the pain of your conscience, your guilt. If you are expecting something in return, it undermines the true spirit of generosity. Because if that's the case, it's not an unconditional gift. It's an investment. Do you understand this? Notice something extremely important in human life, the noblest things we possess. Love, justice, fraternity. If there is any self-interest involved, they cease to be what they are. They lose their true nature. Imagine a young woman in love with a gentleman, and you ask her, why do you like him? Oh, I like him because he has a good job. Have you seen how much he earns each month? You would say, that's not love. You're making an investment. Do you see what I mean? A person helps an elderly person cross the street, and you ask, why did you do that? What a beautiful act. Oh, I did it because I was paid 500 reais to do it. There goes the fraternity, right? It was an investment, and a well-paid one at that. It was an investment. So you realize that all the noble things in humanity, if you do them out of self-interest, they lose their true character. Love, justice, fraternity, kindness. I did it to gain something. Look, it's not quite that as if you remove compensation, you won't do it anymore. So the motivation is not the virtue itself. That makes it cease to be a true virtue. If you stop to observe the motivations in our current society, which virtue would truly remain standing? Which one exists without any compensation other than the virtue itself? You would say that this is the gift, this is generosity. I expect nothing except to fulfill myself as a human being. That makes things complicated, eh? True acts of giving are rare, as are true acts of generosity. And so the poem begins. It's quite interesting because a wealthy man is going to ask him about this. So a rich man said, "Speak to us of giving." And he replied, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give." Isn't it curious? In our mindset, we think that a wealthy person cannot be generous or they wouldn't be wealthy. Why is that? We tend to believe that simply giving up material possessions is already an act of generosity in itself, or we think that the only thing we can do for someone in need is to give them things. Sometimes, giving things can actually be cruel because it prevents the person from growing. It prevents them from living the experiences they need to go through. You are interfering with a mechanism of life. My grandmother used to say a very interesting phrase. It's a popular saying, you know it. She used to say, "Necessity makes the frog jump." It teaches the frog to jump. Have you heard that one? It's well known, isn't it? As a child, around 9 or 10 years old, I used to think, what is this necessity that makes the poor frog keep jumping? I didn't understand it. It took me many years to decode my grandmother's philosophy. And today I understand that, many times, we only know one kind of generosity, which is giving things, and that's the easiest one. To give of yourself, to commit your life to something or someone, is much more complicated. So we tend to think that a wealthy person cannot be generous. That is a lie, a mistake. And I always say this in the philosophy course, it's a misconception that we need to correct. A person whose purpose is to be a virtuous person, a good person, to have being as the goal of life, does it prevent you from having things as means? Does being prevent having? Imagine Plato, who wrote beautiful works of philosophy. If he had the internet to share them with the whole world, wouldn't that have been good for humanity? If people who are very generous had the means to expand their generosity, wouldn't that be better? Having does not prevent, as a means, it only prevents when it becomes the end. When you live for the sake of having things, but when you live for the sake of building yourself and helping human beings to grow, having as a means is actually good. It will empower you to do even more. Do you see? But when you make having your ultimate goal, my purpose in life is to possess many things, to be the richest person in the world. Does having as an end prevent being as a means? I want to be the richest person in the world. If I am fraternal, that will get in the way, won't it? Whenever I start getting rich, I give it all away. I'll never be rich that way. Do you see that? It just won't work. Sometimes we have a medieval mindset. Possessing things is a sin that a generous person cannot allow. But why? If you have things as the result of your work, not as the purpose of your life, but as means. Sometimes, not having things is not a sign of generosity or altruism, but rather of an inability to attain them. To sing? He presents it as a contrast. The rich man speaks about generosity. He must not know what he's talking about. Why? He already answers. You give little when you give only of your possessions. Do you think that giving is only about giving things? That is just the first stage of generosity. He goes on to explain this further. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are your possessions but things you keep out of fear that you may need them tomorrow? Understand that here he is speaking of possessions, but not only physical possessions. A person who accumulates excessively, far more than is needed for a dignified life, far more than would be necessary to live well and in good conditions. This reveals a fear and insecurity, as if, in some way, one might depend on or need these things. He has polarized, he has reversed the meaning of his life. Instead of generosity, it has become a matter of need. He has expanded his needs beyond what is normal. This is a mistake. But you will notice, within the logic of the previous slide, that it is often more difficult to let go of possessions on the emotional level, for example, than on the physical level. Do you understand this? I have told a story many times. Perhaps you have already heard it. But allow me to tell it once more. It is perfect for explaining this situation. It is a Zen tale. There was a very wise master and a prince, where that monastery was located. There was a kingdom ruled by a very generous prince. There was no misery, and people lived well. This prince dreamed of becoming a disciple of that master. He would go there, talk with him, but was never accepted. One day, the prince decided to ask the master a question. Master, today I heard you speak about selfishness, and I did not understand. Could you explain to me what selfishness is? The master saw an opportunity to test the prince and help him understand why he had not been accepted. The master pretended to be very irritated. He turned red, furrowed his brow, and appeared to be furious. What stupidity! How can you ask me such a foolish question? Then the prince jumped up. Wait a minute. Show some respect. I am a prince. Who do you think you're talking to? Then the master said, see, that is selfishness. You are willing to give up the things you possess. But when it comes to what you believe yourself to be, what others think of you, the honors you think you deserve, you do not let go. Your selfishness has been transplanted to the emotional plane. And there it is harder to overcome because it is more difficult to recognize. It is subtler, more challenging to conquer. So when we accumulate possessions on this plane, it becomes even harder to let them go. If you stop to think about it, the great men throughout history, were they great because they possessed many things, or because they gave so much? Take a moment to reflect. If a person needs many things in order to be great, then it is the greatness of the things, not of the person. Isn't that so? The truly great individuals were those who gave much. Even today, we continue to receive from them, as in the case of Gibran himself. They were great because of the magnitude of their generosity. So understand that life will always be asking us for generosity. It asks on one level, the physical. You give. Do you think it will stop there? No, it will rise to the emotional level. You give again. Then it will continue to rise to the mental level. Those rigid convictions you hold, the fanaticism, the lack of vision. Life keeps asking for more. Until one day you say, no, don't touch that, because that I will not give up. That's fine, life will respect you. But that is your measure. You are as great as your generosity. So he speaks of those people who accumulate on any level, because they feel insecure and believe that something will be lacking for them, and notice how harsh he is in this assessment. And tomorrow, what will tomorrow bring to the overly cautious dog who buries bones in the quicksand, while following the pilgrims to the holy city? That is why I spoke about the importance of a philosophical analysis of Gibran's poems. Because a phrase like this may not seem to mean much, but in fact, it carries profound meaning. The excessively cautious dog, who thinks he is safeguarding things and buries them in quicksand. That quicksand will swallow up what he is burying, and he will never see it again. Do you really think we are able to accumulate anything on the material plane, or even on the emotional level? Is there truly anything in this material world that actually belongs to us? There is an Eastern proverb that says, what is yours cannot be taken away from you. All of this will be taken away from us. What people think of us will be taken away even more quickly. Titles, honors. Have you ever noticed how curious and cruel it is, for example, with those famous Hollywood artists, because they often live for the sake of a facade that has been created. And the public is merciless. The person grows old, goes out of fashion, and is completely forgotten. And these people fall into depression. Some have even taken their own lives. And we are left wondering, did they really believe that people liked them for who they truly were? People liked a mask that the media had constructed. It wasn't really them. And people believe it. They think those honors are truly for them, that they possess all those qualities, that those things will always be there. And when all of that is gone, and it goes quickly, most of them die in complete anonymity, sometimes facing financial hardship. When it all disappears, the pain is overwhelming, because they believed they possessed things on the material and emotional planes and built their lives on quicksand. I always give an example. I share this story because I believe it adds a lot of value. It is the story of that doctor, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a psychiatrist and thanatologist working with terminally ill patients. In 40 years of her profession, she says the following: the more materialistic a person is, the less likely they are to face death with clarity. They suffer from episodes of unconsciousness, from memory loss. They cannot bear it, because in that moment they realize that everything they thought they had, they never truly possessed. What difference does it make to a dying person how many cars they have in their garage? Or how many digits are in their bank account? Do you realize how all of that sinks into quicksand? It amounts to nothing. And if they have nothing more solid, nothing that they have built within themselves as a human being, nothing that others have built around them thanks to their presence. In other words, what he allowed others to grow into and how he himself grew, that's solid, something nobody can take from him. If he is just, he is just, and people became just because of him. If he is fraternal, and people became fraternal because of him. No one can take that away. But if he has nothing solid and real, at that moment, everything disappears into the quicksand. And notice the subtle irony of Gibran when he says, like the overly cautious dog who buries bones in quicksand, while following the pilgrims to the holy city. Do you know what that means? It is a religious pilgrimage. And this man follows, like a dog. Why does he go? Because everyone else is going. Isn't that why a dog goes? People even joke that a dog enters the church simply because it finds the door open. Why does it go? Because everyone else is going. And sometimes it has no awareness of anything truly sacred. Sometimes it just follows what we call a religious routine. And religious means to reconnect heaven and earth, vertical. Yet he is preoccupied with his bones buried in the earth, and follows that crowd in a completely unconscious way. He does it because it has always been done, because everyone does it. Notice that here he is speaking about very delicate matters. Sometimes this horizontal relationship of interests is so deep and so ingrained that we transfer it to our relationship with what we consider sacred. Don't we? Sometimes we relate to God out of fear of what he might take away or out of desire for what he might give. This is an investment, a private pension plan. Isn't that so? An investment, a horizontal relationship. So he says that at times one follows a sacred procession just as a little dog would follow along. But the concern, the mind, is fixed on the bones buried in the sand. Little does he know that nothing truly belongs to him. Time erodes everything. And what is the fear of need if not the need itself? Isn't your fear of thirst, even when your well is full, the very thirst that cannot be quenched? So I think that a full well is not enough to quench my thirst. I need to store even more water. The thirsty pass by me. No, I need to store it. I might need it later. I have created a need far greater than what is natural. Where there is great need, there is little generosity. In other words, this greed for excessive security for myself makes me become insensitive to the needs of others, so that I do not commit myself to humanity, do not develop love, fraternity, and I give up that which is most important and real that I could accumulate, which would be values. Once again, Jung. I don't know why I keep remembering him so much, because honestly, I hadn't planned on this, but he has a phrase that I find very interesting, which says that modern man, who talks so much about economics, he is actually a squanderer, who squanders what is most precious, which is the spirit. We only have this opportunity to develop generosity and justice, and we throw it away for material things that we will inevitably lose. For unreal things, we discard generosity, which is real. The Emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, who was a great philosopher, was once asked, "Emperor, you make such a point of being kind, generous. Is it because, after death, you want to have a privileged place among the gods? And what if there is nothing after death, and there are no gods?" Then he responds with a logical exercise that I find excellent. He says the following: if there is something after death, it is good for you to be kind and generous now in order to deserve it. But if there is nothing, it is still good to be kind and generous now, because it is the only opportunity you have. So, in any case, make the most of it, do not waste it. If there is nothing, then you must be kind and generous. There will be no other opportunity to be so. And to be is the most precious thing we can do as human beings. There are those who give little of the much they possess, and they do so to be praised, and their secret desire diminishes the value of their gifts. So he begins to speak about the compensations that generosity brings, sometimes very subtle, but still necessary for them. You will notice that this one is the most obvious. There is a biblical passage that says, "Let not your left hand know what your right hand is doing." If we need public recognition for our generosity, we're advertising ourselves, not practicing true generosity, promoting our supposed goodness, and that is what we seek, because we are not concerned with the needs of others. And he moves on to more subtle levels we do not recognize easily. And there are those who have little, yet give it all away. These trust in life and in the generosity of life, and their coffers are never empty. So there are people who have little and give everything they have, and they say, "God will provide for me, I will not lack anything." But what if they did lack? Would they be traumatized, and the next day, if they had something, would they stop giving? He is speaking here in a very subtle, unconditional way. I give you all the food I have, and I think I will not be left wanting. Usually, nothing is lacking, because life is generous. But what if something was lacking? When I had something again, would I continue to give? Or do I only get if I have the guarantee that life will provide? And what if nothing came and I went hungry the next day? The next day, if I had something again, would I go back to giving? Do you see? It starts to move into more subtle realms, because the truly generous person expects nothing, not even that life will give or not give. They give as they see no other possibility. As a human, they have no other choice. And it continues, moving further into the subtle. And there are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. If I give something to someone and that person frowns and responds rudely, will I continue giving tomorrow? Or was I expecting that at the very least they would give me a smile? Does the fact that I receive no positive response from the other person discourage my generosity? Because if so, I am depending on that joy. I am expecting some kind of return, do you understand? And there are those who give out of pity, and that pity is their baptism. They give as if they are giving away a piece of themselves, as if it were a terrible sacrifice. This pain will help them to grow and to let go. But neither of these is true generosity, neither those who expect joy nor those who suffer in giving. So, what would true generosity be? And there are those who give without feeling pity or seeking joy, and without thinking about virtue. It is not because I want to be good, nor because I want others to like me, nor because I will earn merits in this life or the next. I give because I am human, and life expects a human being to be generous. They give as the myrtle in the valley spreads its fragrance through the air. I am going to share a short story that happened to me recently, and in fact, I even wrote about it. At the back of my yard, my husband planted a cherry tomato plant. And I didn't know that these plants dry out quickly. For a while, it produced so many tomatoes, it looked like a Christmas tree. There were so many tomatoes. And then, suddenly, almost overnight, it dried up. It dried up from the stem to all the branches. It was completely dry. That is simply part of its life cycle. So, one of these days, I opened my bedroom window, which faces this tomato plant, and it was completely dry. But on one branch, far from the stem, there were 3 bright red tomatoes. It was as if the plant had gathered all the life energy it had left, the little sap that remained, and gave us one last gift. And it was such a beautiful thing. That dry branch looked like an outstretched hand. An act of generosity, offering the last bit of life it still had. Do you think that tomato plant asked me what I was going to do with that tomato? If I deserved the tomato or not? If I was going to eat it or throw it away? Make a salad or give it to someone else? Nothing. Why does it give? Because it is a tomato plant. It didn't expect to end up on Facebook, even though it did. I posted a picture of it there. It didn't expect anything. Why did it do it? What expectation does the tomato plant have? None. It wanted one thing, to be a tomato plant. And as a tomato plant, it has to use every last drop of life. It has to give you fruit. Do you see that? It's like a very beautiful example from Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, who was the philosophy professor who founded New Acropolis. And he spoke about a candle, an object made for you to light the wick and give you light. Isn't that right? But nowadays, they make beautiful candles for the market. You must have seen them, with all sorts of shapes, all very pretty. When you get a candle like that, you say you're not going to light it. Imagine lighting a candle this way. What a shame. Brasilia is a dry city. Do you know what will happen over time? That candle will dry out, turn to powder, and cease to exist. But in this way, it will cease to exist as a paperweight, not as a candle. Because a candle is defined as something that gives light. By giving light, it destroys itself. If it doesn't give light, it destroys itself. The difference is, it destroys itself without having truly been. Do you understand? It dies without ever having been born as a candle. Do you think human beings are much different? We were made to give light. And if we don't, do we also die? We die, but without ever having truly been human. Without ever having borne the fruits that nature expects from us. And why should we give light? Does the candle ask, oh, will they value my light? I am illuminating what? Let me see if it's worth it. No. I give light as I am a candle. I give tomatoes as I am a tomato plant. I give flowers as I am a rose bush. And I do not ask what you will do with it, nor do I judge whether you deserve it. I give because of who I am, and I expect nothing in return. Do you understand this? Because I am. I am human, and I too was made to bear fruit. And to be human, I must produce the fruits that nature expects from me. And some of these are justice, fraternity, and generosity. And what you do with that, that is an issue between you and nature. I am human, and I have fulfilled my purpose. I thank that tomato plant deeply for the lesson it gave me. Nothing, no expectations, only giving, only generosity. Through the hands of such beings, God speaks, and through their eyes, He smiles upon the world. It is said that we are in this world to be channels through which this divine being accomplishes things. I always give a Taoist example from the tradition of Lao Tzu, who said that man is like a bamboo tube. The breath of the divine enters from one side. On the other side, pure air should come out. If you are full of dust, out comes dust. The light of the divine enters from one side. What should come out on the other side? Light. If you are full of dirt, what comes out is shadow. Shadows were born in the world because people became opaque. So we should strive to be as human as possible, so that we do not hinder the work of nature from being accomplished through us. You will see what we are still going to do in this series of lectures on Gibran. A chapter, which is my favorite, about prayer. When he speaks about prayer, he does so with such clarity that he says, it is no use addressing God with words, because God does not hear your words, unless he himself utters them through your voice. Understand that? When will your words have meaning for him? When you speak of the things that he needs in the world, and lend your voice to that purpose, instead of living according to a selfish world, wanting God to sponsor your personal and selfish project. God is not a sponsor of selfish projects. I often tell people, when I give lectures on education, that every good educator should say to their children or to their students the same thing that is said God says to men: to rise, count on me; to fall, go down alone. Do you get this? If you want to rise, I will back your cause. Fall, go down alone. I do not support selfish causes. So we become a channel through which what belongs to the world reaches the world. We fulfill our role as human beings. We do not stand in the way of the light reaching the world. We do not create shadows. And why do we do this? Because we want to be human and nothing more. The greatest reward for one who loves is to be loving, as a poem once said. And that is truly how it is. You need nothing more than this. If you expect anything else, it's no longer love. Is that so? It is beautiful to give when asked. But it is even more beautiful to give without being asked. Simply because you have understood. And for those who are generous, seeking someone to receive is an even greater joy than the act of giving itself. Gibran is profound. And here, he moves on to another topic and says, do not expect those who receive from you to be grateful. And if you have received something from someone, do not feel bound to that person in the sense of having to repay them. Because a truly generous person does not give in order to receive anything back from you. Act so that you may grow as a human being and be able to benefit others. And give thanks to the heavens, give thanks to whatever it is you believe in. Thank God for having had the opportunity to give something to someone. For the opportunity to be generous, and let that be your fulfillment. I don't know if you ever got to know, there are some examples that, in fact, I need to update. Because now no one knows this anymore. When I was a child, there was a little card game called Miko. Does that still exist? It was a game with matching cards that formed pairs. It was a simple thing, but I had a lot of fun with it. You would keep collecting, and there was one card like a wild card that had no pair. And when you got that card, you lost, because you couldn't make a pair with it. And it's interesting that you notice. I was remembering this game the other day. And I realized that sometimes I look at something and find it beautiful because of someone I know. So if they were here would love this. And if I hadn't known that person, I wouldn't see the beauty in this object, this landscape, this music. The fact that I met that person allowed me to perceive the beauty of this moment. Haven't you ever said, this reminds me of so-and-so? This is so like so-and-so. Why did you notice the beauty in that? Because you knew that person. They gave you the opportunity to see beauty through the values they hold, the good things they possess. So you start collecting cards. That person and this beautiful situation, that person and this beautiful painting, that person and this beautiful landscape. You keep gathering the beautiful things in life. The selfish person is left holding the joker. There are things that don't match with anything. The selfish person has lost the game. They're left holding the joker, unable to find its pair. Why? Because they don't want to give anything away. So they keep everything for themselves and lose the game of life. Understand? Through the people you meet, you have the opportunity to see something beautiful in the world. Because if you are able to see beauty in someone, you will find something similar somewhere else. And you will connect those two things. And you keep playing this game of Miko throughout life. Honestly, I don't even know why it was called Miko. You keep playing, bringing together beautiful things, making pairs. We should be grateful for the opportunity that people give us to be generous and not expect their gratitude, because otherwise you create a condition. If gratitude ends, I won't be generous. And is there anything you can truly keep? Everything you possess will, one day, be given away. So now, therefore, let the time of giving be yours, and not your heirs. Understand this well. It's not that he doesn't want your heirs to be generous, but a life must be complete, a time for planting, a time for harvesting, a time for sharing. What has been gathered? Well, I don't want to give. Then this opportunity to share will belong only to those who come after you. In my life, there will be no harvests. My life will be an incomplete cycle. Nature has a time for planting, a time for harvesting, and a time for sharing. Will my life not have all these moments? Then my life will be an incomplete cycle. It is a life without spring, without autumn, a life that has not come full circle. It is fair to wish that future generations will be generous. But even more just is that we begin to set an example in our own lives, that we do not give up the opportunity to give. If you try an exercise, you might get upset with me because it is an exercise that will take a lot of effort. But once you get used to it, you will see that it is very interesting. Before going to sleep, close your eyes and look for a moment in your day when you were generous. And if you haven't been, get up and do something, like watering a plant, being generous with it. Demand of yourself at least one act of generosity each day. Very simple things. Sometimes, just a smile for someone you greet on the street. A moment of attention, a simple act where you break free from this madness of the human mind that makes us think only of ourselves, of indulging ourselves, thinking only about our own pains and needs. Step out of this prison of the small self and think a little about someone else. Allow yourself not to be alone in the world. Think of something or someone beyond yourself. One act of generosity per day. You can't imagine the standard of moral demand this creates within us, and the change it brings to our lives. A small gesture, but it is truly remarkable. This gradually makes us more human. You often say, I would give, but only to those who deserve it. Why didn't I give? That person didn't deserve it. Don't we say this? The trees in your orchards do not speak this way, nor do the flocks in your pastures. They give in order to continue living, for to withhold is to perish. Imagine if my tomato plant refused to give me tomatoes because it thought I didn't deserve them. That energy trapped inside it would kill it. If the apple tree refused to give apples because it didn't know what people would do with them, holding life within itself would cause it to die, to cease to exist. To withhold life is to lose it. Life flows through us. As he says, generosity is not yours, it belongs to life. It uses you as a vehicle. Do not be vain about your generosity because it does not belong to you. It honored you by making you its vehicle. Because if you did not honor life, you would not be able to possess it. It did not ask anything of you. It gave you the opportunity to be in the world, to live your experience without asking you for a resume. Isn't that so? Without asking you for anything. And that is what he will talk about next. Surely, whoever is worthy of receiving from life its days and its nights is worthy of receiving from you all else as well. And whoever has deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill their cup from your small stream. In other words, life has given this person a place in the world. It has given them a body, health, and people who love them. Life gave them an ocean, and you have a little pond, yet you are bargaining. No, you do not deserve it. Who are you to judge if life gave so much? But he is not worthy, that's his problem. I am worthy of giving. Have you ever heard of this novel, which is very famous precisely because of this scene, a Spanish novel called El Cid? It was made into a movie. Have you seen it? I will summarize the story a lot, just to focus on the scene that interests me. There was a king who had no character at all, and a very noble and honorable knight. The king, out of envy, banished this knight. And this knight continued to fight for the king who had banished him. Until one day, the king realizes that he had been foolish because he had banished a hero, who was still serving him. So he goes after him and bows before him. Then he says, "No, do not bow. You are my king, and my king does not bow before anyone." It is El Cid on his deathbed who says this to the king. "Do not bow. My king does not bow before anyone." Then the king says, "But I am not worthy of being king." El Cid replies, "But I'm worthy of having a king." If you are not worthy of being king, that is your problem with life. I am to have a king. And my king does not do that. He does not bow before anyone. My tomato plant would say, I am worthy of giving tomatoes. Whether you are worthy of eating them or not, that is your problem with life. I am doing my part. I am giving to you. I am a tomato plant. I honor my species. I am worthy of giving tomatoes. What you choose to do is not my concern. This is identity. The sacred is the function of giving meaning. When each thing assumes its own identity, it becomes sacred. When each thing fulfills its purpose, there is no profanity, there is nothing trivial. Everything in the universe becomes sacred. It fits in time and in space. Understand? And what greater merit could there be than that which resides in courage and trust? And even more so, in the charity of receiving? I give to you, and you say, "Ah, but I will be able to reciprocate." What is this? Allow me a chance to give to you. Whether you will reciprocate is something to be seen later, something you discover in life. But feel honored for having given someone the opportunity to be generous. An opportunity. I once told a story that happened here in Brasilia. It was published a few years ago. I won't mention any names. It's the story of a person who still lives in the city, but I found the story very intriguing. They say he was a citizen, a very materialistic executive, and he tells the story in first person. And that one day, on Christmas Eve, he was very stressed, driving along the Ixo Monumental, inside his car. He stopped at a traffic light, and a little boy came up who, according to him, was about 9 or 10 years old, with a shoebox, collecting donations. Are you familiar with this story? He says that the boy asked him for a donation, and he, in a very bad mood and running late, said, "I don't have anything, my boy. I don't even have anything to eat myself." And this boy had a ripe mango inside the box, and said, "No, sir, you won't go without eating. Here, take this mango. It's all I have, but that's okay. I'll find another one later. I won't let you go without eating." He says that he looked at the boy, and the child wasn't joking with him. He was being completely serious. And he had to accept that mango, because it would have been discourteous not to. He accepted it, placed it on the passenger seat, and 100 meters later, he stopped to cry. And that act of generosity from that boy changed his life. I found this story interesting because it shows that a small, human act of generosity is sometimes a turning point in the consciousness of another human being. It becomes an example, a point of reference. So, for him, it would have been tremendously rude to accept the only mango that the boy had. But for that boy, it was an honor. To give the only mango, he had to satisfy someone else's hunger. He says, what greater merit could there be than that which lies in the courage, the trust, and the charity of receiving? Receive, and strive to honor this act of generosity. Should you repay the one who gave to you? No, be generous and pass it forward. And who are you that others should bear their innermost selves and strip away their pride, so that you may see their merit exposed and their self-respect diminished? Imagine a person whom you feel is in need, and you are able to give. But let me see if you deserve it. Let me check your background. What is your character like? Are you a consistent person? Will you demand that someone expose themselves and humble themselves when you are doing nothing more than your duty? If you have the means to give, then give. Do you expose yourself to that extent? Do you usually tell others whether you have merit or not? Of course that hurts, because in general, people are aware of their flaws, and it is painful to expose them. Isn't that so? Who are we to demand a resume in order to do something that is nothing more than our duty? First, seek to see if you yourselves deserve to be donors and instruments of giving. For, in truth, it is life that gives to life, while you, who consider yourselves givers, are merely witnesses. You are witnessing life expressing itself through you. Feel honored by this. Kindness has flowed through you, generosity, love. Feel honored by this. And you simply served as a vehicle. It is life that gives. It is life that loves. It is life that benefits. Do you understand? Let us feel ourselves as vehicles so that life may fulfill itself. And it is interesting, within this next sentence that he's about to say, and you, who receive, and all of you receive, do not take on any burden of gratitude, so that you do not place a yoke upon yourselves or upon your benefactors. Instead, rise up together with them on wings made of their gifts. This is the end of the poem. We have reached such a level of not understanding what generosity truly is, that even within this realm of the sacred, we believe there is some kind of exchange involved. There is a very old story about a philosopher named Apollonius of Tyana, which says that this philosopher traveled throughout the world, trying to reform religions that had fallen into decline. At that historical time, Egypt was already in a state of great decadence. And one day he enters an Egyptian temple where they were performing animal sacrifices, killing animals to offer as sacrifices. There are still those who do this even today, as you know. And he enters this temple, shouting, saying the following: "Abstain from washing your altars in blood. No sacrifice is desirable to the gods, except the sacrifice of your animal self on the altars of wisdom." Notice what he is saying: if there is a divine being, by virtue of the very condition of being divine. This was a time when people were polytheists, which is why he speaks of gods. But regardless of what you believe, if there is a divine being, by virtue of the very condition of being divine, does this being need anything from you? What is the only thing that this being would need from you, something that cannot be obtained alone? Do you know what it is? Your growth. There is a law, which we sometimes find quite inconvenient, called free will, which means no one can force you to evolve unless you truly want to. So these beings, or this being, no matter how much power they possess, cannot force you to evolve. To obtain this, you must offer it willingly. So what is the only sacrifice that would be meaningful to a being with such a level of consciousness? The sacrifice of your animal self, that is, of coarseness, brutality, and ignorance. This is what is needed from you, and this is what is desired. Do you realize that, probably, it was from the confusion of this idea that ceremonial sacrifices were born? A misunderstanding of this concept. Notice that we don't even need to speak of a divine being. We can speak of a noble person, a generous person. If this person gave you something, what might they expect from you? Are they making an investment? No. What they hope for is your growth, and that is the only thing you can truly offer them. If they are truly acting out of nobility, it doesn't have to be a divine being to encompass all of this. A noble person already possesses this quality. They do not expect you to give anything back to them. They hope for your growth, and that, as you grow, your generosity will overflow to others. If someone does not act with this intention, they are not truly a noble person. Understand? So, first, rise up, together with them, on the wings shaped by their gifts. Some of you may have watched the movie Les Miserables. Have you seen it? It is based on a novel by Victor Hugo. If you haven't, I encourage you. We will be discussing it at the Soberdenho School. It is a beautiful film about a man who transformed his life because of an act of generosity from another person. He was a former convict, and a kind of priest welcomes him into his home and treats him with great kindness. And then, in the dead of night, he steals all the priest's silverware and is caught by the police. When the police bring him back to the priest's house, the priest says, "No, he didn't steal from me. I gave this to him. In fact, take this as well. You forgot it. It is exactly this scene. Look, my son, you left so quickly that you forgot these 2 candlesticks." He keeps these 2 candlesticks forever as a reminder of that moment, and he becomes an extremely generous man. Notice how this has a multiplying effect, how it transforms people's lives. Those who are humane generate humanity. Just as an apple tree produces apples, a tomato plant grows tomatoes. Those who are humane generate humanity, within themselves and in everyone around them. And this is Gibran's idea about giving, about generosity. And here we finish. As I mentioned to you, it is a short chapter. Although today's is a bit longer, with 2.5 pages. There are some that have only 1 page. But it is such a dense page, filled with such profound things, that sometimes it takes just as long. So notice that, as mentioned, some sentences would be difficult to read quickly or superficially. They require philosophical reflection, and how much we can draw from them when analyzed in this way. We come to realize that Gibran, besides being a poet, was a philosopher. It's hard to imagine a true poet who is not also a philosopher. Otherwise, what would he speak about? He would have no subject, only form, and no content. He's a philosopher. And of course, philosophy helps us understand what a philosopher says. He possesses a very profound content. So I hope that now you can read Gibran with a new dimension. This is what we do in the philosophy course, with Plato, with Aristotle, with various authors. Alone, with only the tools that life gives us, because life does not teach us to have depth or a symbolic vision. We only accumulate quantity, very little depth. We do not have the habit of reflection. The idea of philosophy is, among other things, to teach us to reflect on life itself. And Gibran is part of our heritage. He has much to teach us, if we are willing to reflect. And that's it. Do you have any questions?